Okay, yeah.
There we go.
Good evening, McAuliffe ambassadors and McAuliffe fans. This is Alan Rubin with McAuliffe Cigars, and tonight we have a special guest joining us for Off the Record. But let me first introduce you to my co-host, Lauren Coper.
Hello.
She's very festive today with the Christmas coming up. Tonight we have a special guest, industry veteran, longtime sales manager, and the current national sales manager for Crown Heads and Ozinger Cigars, Miguel Schoedel.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate the invite. And whenever there's an excuse to have a cigar, chat with fellow cigar people, it is always a pleasure to do so. So thank you for inviting me on tonight.
You're welcome.
And
We do appreciate it.
what are we all smoking today? That's always the question, right?
Well, I'll go. I'll go first. What's funny is I'm smoking a cigar that we actually discontinued. Sometimes when you make so many different blends, certain blends become hits, certain cigars kind of fall by the wayside. And I'm smoking a Luminosa, which is our only Connecticut cigar that we've ever really done at Crown Heads. And I got a box of Petite Coronas in today from my office for my personal smoking pleasure. Earlier, I smoked the Las Calaveras, which is a very popular cigar that Don Pepin Garcia from the My Father Cigar Factory makes for us. But tonight, I wanted to go something mild and smooth, and Luminosa was it. Sometimes you have a gem that just never found its hole, and so that's what I'm smoking tonight. I've got a bunch of these little Petite Coronas, which is my favorite size.
You know, I'm very surprised because usually like mild cigars usually do very well in the market. So like it just never found its spot in, I guess.
No, no. To be honest with you, we've done a couple of LE Connecticut's in the past, and our Crown Heads clientele just is not receptive to Connecticut's. And I hope for us as we've continued to grow, we had 2 reps and 3. Now we have 6 in-house reps. We've grown the company considerably, and our reach has grown considerably. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to put a great Connecticut out. I came up in cigars in the 90s, and so I have a great love and affection for Connecticut's as they were the king of the world in the 90s. So, so I hope that this blend comes back one day, or a version of that blend, if you will.
Well, you're basically from the 90s. You're basically a pioneer,
There you go.
essentially, in the cigar industry, I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I've been smoking a long time, and it was an exciting time in the 90s. You had to love Connecticut's. Dominicans ruled the world. It was a different world back then.
Yeah.
What is the most profound thing that you remember from the 90s during that time?
The most profound thing in the 90s was you really had to do your own homework on cigars. The only way you were going to learn anything is either pick up Cigar Aficionado or go to your local cigar shop. There were no chat rooms. There was no vlogs or podcasts. None of that existed in the 90s. So for you to find out about a new cigar, you had to either see an ad in Cigar Aficionado, which was very expensive, or you had to go to your local cigar shop. And the humidors were packed full of the big brand stuff, not a lot of boutiques. And as I said, Connecticut's ruled the world. Now, during the boom, 92 to about 96, and then it bled in over about to 98, 99, there was a lot of bad cigars on the market at the time. There were just a lot of Don whatevers, Don pick a name, and so you had to really search, where I would argue today, you could go into almost any humidor in the country, blindfolded, grab a cigar off the shelf, and 7 out of 10 times, if not 8 out of 10 times, you're probably going to enjoy that cigar.
Absolutely. I started smoking in 1999, and I can remember what it was like going to a humidor versus now. You'd be going to a store and there'd be 50 different cigars on the shelf. Now there's 1,000.
Yep. Yep.
So I'm smoking the Mil Diaz Maduro,
Oh, I
which
love that one.
came out early this
Oh.
year. Is that correct? Or is it
Yeah.
last
Yeah. Mil Diaz came out in February. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good cigar, very full body, really good. I've really enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you, Alan.
What are you smoking tonight?
Well, for me personally, I could not. Well, I do like the Mia Diaz. I like both of them. Fantastic smokes. But right now I'm smoking McAuliffe. I smoke. Well,
Oh, beautiful.
I like Marlienda, because I'm drinking bourbon right now. So like Ecuadorian Habano wrappers just pair amazingly with whiskey. So I decided to go with the safe bet today. But I am a huge fan of Crown Heads. You guys make fantastic, fantastic cigars.
Well, I'll tell you, I myself, to echo that, I enjoy your guys's the red, the black. I love the new color series you guys have put out. I think it really pops off the shelf, and obviously a big fan of what you guys do. I've known Alan a long time, and I think what McAuliffe has done out there is awesome with your ambassadors and your group out there, and you guys do some great events, and I think that's I think brands like yours and brands like the company I work for are really the innovators of the industry and bring a lot of excitement to today's smokers.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Isn't it like the testament of smaller brands? Like, I feel like we're always bringing like kind of a fresh perspective to the industry, and we're so small too. Like, why wouldn't we be supportive about, like, we want to be successful, we want you to be successful? That just like kind of complements kind of like the continuing legacy of cigars in general. So like that's why we love
Yeah.
having you guys on. And we all know as cigar smokers, we're smoking everyone. We're not smoking
You,
just our brand.
I love when I walk into a cigar shop and the owners of the shop always go, "Hey, before you go, grab a cigar out of the humidor." They know we enjoy smoking
Yeah.
each other's cigars, and you talked about, the small companies doing unique things in the industry. To use a sports reference,
We're gonna
someone
be talking
used
about
this.
sports right away, huh?
Well, the 3-point line in the NBA came from the ABA. And sometimes rules in sports come from the smaller organizations, and they pick up these ideas. And so I think when you look at any of the trends that have happened in the industry, full-bodied cigars, I mean, you could argue that came from Ernesto Perez Carrillo when he had his El Rico Habano back in the 90s. It was not popular to do a full-bodied cigar, or Maduros and Oscuros cigars. Ligero, using a lot of Ligero in cigars, really cigar brands like La Flor Dominicana when mild cigars ruled the world. So I think companies like ours, we truly are the innovators of the industry, and we
I
influence
challenge
the
the
big
market too. We
companies, challenge
challenge
the
the market.
market.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Hmm.
100%. Ooh, it's cold out here.
Oh, hey, Alan, you're still on mute. Just to let you know.
Sorry. The innovation definitely comes from the smaller companies. I mean, it's weird because there's a lot of bigger companies that also innovate, and a lot of those bigger companies were like your former company, CAO, that like started in the 80s and 90s, and like I mean back then the entire boom was really a lot of it was pushed by some really exciting brands that now like Oliva, LFD, CAO, Drew Estate, Alec Bradley, they later became like the stalwarts of the industry, but they all started off with that aggressive, creative marketing back in the '90s, and it's cool
Yeah.
to see how those companies have
It,
evolved.
I remember when Alec Bradley was basically the bundle Occidental in stores. I remember when Rocky was doing 200 events a year, and he would beg you to buy to try one of his Indian tobaccos, and the innovation of box press cigars were out of vogue. Parejo, or what we call straight sided cigar, a round cigar is a Parejo, right? Box press cigars were out of vogue, and then in '96, Padron put out the Anniversario and brought box press cigars kind of back into vogue, and now everybody does box press cigars, and people kind of forget, that a lot of these things, or even Figurados were completely out of style, and then in the '80s, Fuente released the Hemingway series, which was all based on Figurados, and so all of these different trends and things that we see are really can be attributed to a lot of the smaller brands. And when I say smaller brands, we're not talking, micro small brands. We're talking about brands that make millions of cigars a year, but on the scale of an Altadis, a General, or now Fuente, any of the big guys, definitely smaller scale, but definitely, still making millions of cigars a year.
Oh, absolutely. Um, so one of the things we want to do is we want to start off kind of where you started off in the industry. We kind of already hit on that a little bit. When exactly did you start working in the cigar industry?
So this is my 21st year in the premium cigar industry. I grew up around people smoking cigars. That was part of the Latino culture that you kind of grow up with. I always say it's like Italians with red wine, or I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, so Kentuckians with bourbon. You know what I mean? As babies, you're getting fed bourbon when you don't feel good, or so I grew up around cigars and grew a great appreciation for cigars, and '98, I would say, was the year I became a full-fledged cigar fan, where I was just dabbling the years before that. And CAO became my favorite brand in '98. And after the millennium, a couple years after that, I got to have the pleasure of joining CAO Cigars. CAO was a brand that I loved. Like I said, I fell in love with in '98 and wanted to work for that brand. And everybody at that time was using brokers. Rocky was using brokers. Eric Espinosa was a broker. He didn't have his own brand yet. Drew Estate was using brokers. Perdomo, the only in-house reps in the late '90s was Ashton, Davidoff, Altadis, General, and Fuente Newman. Outside of that, everyone was using brokers. So about 2000, about 2000.
General weren't even companies. They were separate companies of multiple companies.
Yeah, multiple. And so I would say about 2001, 2002. CAO started playing with the idea of going in-house, and I was part of that first full in-house sales team that they brought in and learned by the Osgener family, who've been in the business since 1968. They started as a pipe company and transitioned into cigars. By the time we sold the company in '07, we ran it until 2010, but we sold it in '07 to Henry Winterman, which was part of STG. We were 99% cigars, 1% pipes. So for CAO's trajectory in the industry completely changed from a pipe to a cigar company. But that's when I got to join them, and luckily I had some great teachers over there, and went from being a rep to them sending me out with other reps to work with other people. It really helped me eventually become a national sales manager for Tarano later in my career. And as I was saying before we jumped on air, I've been very blessed. I've worked for the same group of people my entire career. So either if it was at Tarano made all the CAOs and we distributed Tarano, working with Duran and Jack Tarano. At Duran Cigars, Roberto was the face of Dunhill Cigars that we distributed at CAO. So, and obviously the owners of Crowned Heads are Mike Conder, John Huber, and Tim Osgener, who all came from the CAO, and Tim Osgener being the son of the founder, John O. Osgener. So 21 years, all within the same three group of people that we're all intertwined with. So very blessed, very lucky to do something that I've admired since the early '90s, and every opportunity I get, I just try to promote the industry. And I think us three here on that are on this thing, I think our job is to carry the flag of the cigar culture, the cigar hobby to the next generation. The '80s were very tough for cigars. I mean, shops were going out of business, brands were going under. The '80s were very rough until '92 when the boom hit. So people carried the flag to the rough '80s. Obviously, we know what happened during the revolution in Cuba, and people, scattered to Nicaragua, Dominican, Honduras, and Ecuador. And it is our job to make sure that this industry is strong and prominent for the next generation. So I think of people like what we're doing is we're a small bit of a long story of a culture that's been around for thousands of years. And so I'm very proud to be doing what I do.
It's really interesting that you said that, like, the '80s were very tough, especially for cigar smokers. I feel like we're kind of like reaching into like the next struggle of being a cigar smoker, especially with anti-smoking and tobacco laws and everything. Do you see a pattern with that from the '80s until here, like the same kind of struggles, or is it like a different type of, I guess, hurdles that we have to go over?
Well, the '80s were really, the '80s didn't really have bans, didn't really have the import tax and things, the S-chip, right? They were battling that the average cigar smoker was dying off, and their kids weren't picking it up. And so the industry as a whole was dying. There were less people smoking cigars in the '80s, which meant less jobs in Latin America, which really put the industry on a very tough trajectory. If a lot of the older families that are in the business today, a lot of their kids did not think that they would be doing what their fathers did and their mothers did in the cigar industry. Guys like Ernesto Perez Carrillo, he was thinking this industry is dying, and my dad's going to get out of it in the late '80s. I want to become a musician. Or Charlie Tarano's father saying to him in the '80s, you got to go to college and get a degree because this industry is going to die, and there's going to be no job for you in this family industry anymore. And that all changed in '92, obviously, we know. But today's market, the cigars are incredible. The quality is incredible, better than it's ever has been. And yet we're dealing with higher taxes, anti-smoking, arguing with the FDA about what a premium cigar is. So we're in a different hurdle. We're in a different stage, but luckily, I think the industry is healthy. We're just dealing with outside forces instead of inside forces.
You know, it's interesting though, because I have this conversation sometimes with customers, especially because you know, cigars in general. I feel like we're still a younger demographic, but stereotypically, cigars are really stereotypically like white old men, right? That usually like
Yep.
it. And so, but even though we go partake in a lot of cigar lounges, it's always an older demographic, and like the need to replace that demographic in order to keep the longevity of cigars, I still think is a struggle, or not necessarily a struggle, but it should be a topic of a conversation that should be addressed.
Yep.
Like, do you feel like that as well? And then if you do, like, what should we be doing as a culture and an industry? Should be readdressing that every time?
Yeah, well, I think that's where us boutique brands are really doing a great job at bringing in the next generation. I think Drew Estate, I think with infused and flavored cigars have brought in another generation. The amount of women that are smoking today, the African American cigar market has grown tremendously. But I think the boutique brands, when you see Black Label, when you see Crowned Heads, when you see Tatuaje, the demographic is younger. When we say younger, we're talking late 20s, early 30s, opposed to
Can we
maybe
go
the
like
guys
mid
that are
30s? Like for me, like that'd be
yeah,
fine.
yeah. But I mean, it's like, I would do an event back in the day at CAO, and a young 25, 28-year-old guy would come in because he wanted to smoke a CAO Brasilia, and his dad was smoking Macanudo or Montecristo Classic. You know what I mean? It was just a divide in culture. So I think today, more of that needs to be done. But I do think that a lot of the boutique brands, because of the marketing, because of the people that own the brands, when you look at Pete Johnson, when he started Tatuaje, he was a pretty young guy, and Crowned Heads, John Huber. And yeah, these guys have white in their beards now, but when they started their brands, it was much more of a different marketing. It wasn't about necessarily an ad in Cigar Aficionado. It was much more social media driven. And I think that has brought a lot of young cigar smokers in. I think the culture of microbrews, the bourbon industry blowing up with younger people, has really brought a new generation in. But it's something we constantly need to do to keep this culture going strong. I do think it's pretty healthy. I see a lot of young people smoking cigars, and I think we're in a good place as an industry. But it is something we consistently need to do, and I think by doing events, I think through social media, we have been able to target younger professional men and women of all race and cultures to come into the industry and partake in this incredible hobby that we call the premium cigar industry.
You know, it's interesting because I think Crown Heads, you guys are very much an edgy, like I don't want to say like
Yeah.
edgy brand. It necessarily resonates with younger, but it usually does. You brought up Tatuaje. I kid you not, every time I walk into a customer and they have, it's always the younger guys working the humidor. Every time I ask them which cigar they like the most, it's always Tatuaje or Crown Heads. Every time. Because it is. Like, even though Pete Johnson, I still feel like he's a fantastic looking man. He's not getting long in tooth at all, but he does resonate with the younger culture, like especially the culture, like especially the demographic that's coming in and they're working the humidors. It does resonate with them, and that is so important.
Yeah, I think when you see guys like Pete and you see John Huber, they very much look like they could be brothers. I remember a time in the industry where when we were at the trade show, if you had tattoos, you hit them. You always wore a suit with a tie. And then guys like Pete and John, who have been in the industry since the early 90s, they were tattooed guys, piercings, maybe motorcycles. They just were who they were, and they loved cigars. And they brought it to the industry of, hey, it's okay. You can be you, and you can enjoy cigars. You don't have to be, English guy in a suit and tie in an all men's club. It's like, I think of like the movie Titanic, when it's after dinner, the women go off and the guys are going to go have a bourbon and a cigar. Now it's a young guy, a young woman, all race and colors can partake in it. And I think that has helped bring this culture to a whole another generation of people. And I do think guys like Pete, James Brown, John Huber, Tim Osgener, There's Matt Booth is a great name. Bradley from Alec Bradley. I think these guys have they are who they are, and you can be these guys and enjoy cigars. And I think it's only been beneficial to our industry.
And especially, I think one of the things that's difficult in this industry for a long time is if you weren't like Cuban or Latin, like no one gave you validation as far as your brand. But then you see like Jonathan, who's like the crazy gringo that moves down to Nicaragua. But then you see like guys like Rocky's like the perfect example. Like Abe the Badman always talks about how like he laughed at the idea of a cigar called Rocky Patel.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
you think Dave Patel can sell a cigar with all these Latin
Yeah.
moves? I think,
and you know, Alan, you hit on something that's very right, and it was a very Latin dominated industry. But I think what was great about Rocky, and using Rocky as an example, is if you're willing to put into work, if you're willing to invest in Latin America, if you're willing to learn the ways and respect the culture, you eventually get drafted in. You're part of it. I think the head of your guys' company, you know what I mean? I think he has done a great job at respecting the industry and saying, hey, I want to be a part of this industry. And I think when you do that, Rocky definitely paid his dues. And all that success that Rocky has is in the beginning. He'll tell you, he got gringo pricing on tobacco, he got gringo pricing on boxes, and he had to work through that to earn that respect. And Jonathan earned that respect by being a gringo who moved to Esteli, Nicaragua, when it was not a safe place to be, opposed to today, where you go down there and you see backpackers and you see Europeans walking around, hiking the mountains. You can walk around Esteli at 3:00 in the morning. That was a time where you were locked in at the hotel after night fell because it was dangerous. And when they earn that respect, then you get brought in and people respect you. And Rocky's a perfect example of that.
Also, like Skip Martin is another example of that. Like these guys moved down there, they moved their families, and it's weird because the reality was 40 years ago, the cigar industry was dominated by Cuban exiles and Cuban families, and some Jewish people. Because at the time, like Ashton was owned by a Jewish family, General was owned by a Jewish family. So is what was Altus USA. It was back then. It was Consolidated Cigar, because that's where like the history of cigars was in the U.S. for 100 years.
Whoever was in New York City, the movers and shakers in New York City were kind of the industry. Yep.
The import, because it was all about importing, and like people from like the Cuban exiles had a lot of relations to people in the countries like the Dominican Republic, and also the Spaniards, because for a long time after the Cuban embargo, a lot of cigars were made in actually the Canary Islands in Spain.
Canary Islands. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when you first joined Crown Heads, who was your boss at the time? Like,
when I was where?
At Crown Heads, when you first started, who was?
Just Mike and John, and Mike and John, who are the owners of the company with Tim Osner. Oh. Mike and John were the bosses there. They're still the bosses today.
Oh, wow. I didn't know they started.
They started the brand.
No. So when you started off though at not Crown Heads, but at like a CAO, like yes.
CAO. It was the Osgener family. So John O. Osgener was still alive. Eileen Osgener, Tim's sister, and Tim were the presidents and I think vice president at the time. And Mickey Pegg was our national sales manager. He eventually became vice president of sales. And then we had a full in-house sales team. I think at the height we had probably 12 in-house salespeople. But Mickey Pegg was our national sales manager. And by the time we all left, Frank Kapp had taken over his position, and Mickey had moved up to VP of sales. And I will tell you, people always ask me, who I've had the pleasure of working for and who do I respect the most. And I will tell you that John O. Osgener, the founder of CAO, those are his initials. Jono was a revolutionary kind of guy in the pipe industry, and meerschaum industry, and really created some unique things with his kids. I mean, at the time, Brasilia, nobody was talking about using Brazilian tobacco. A green box was weird back then. Italia, using Italian tobacco. I mean, just weird kind of things that MX2, double Maduro wrapper, Maduro binder, like those things had never been done. And so CAO was really on the cutting edge of taking the industry, respecting the culture, but then trying to add a new spin on it. And I think today that's been a huge influence on where we are today as an industry.
Well, it looks like Alan got kicked off for a little bit, but he'll be back on. But I do find that interesting, like how certain things that we take for granted today are like kind of expected, but back then were revolutionary. It's kind of like, do you feel, because I know our demographic in terms of cigar smokers, they're either a mixture between what's new or creatures of habit. So it's kind of trying to build like innovation, but still make it comfortable for our new consumers. Like, how do you feel like you guys do it?
I think for us, at Crowned Heads, we are very much about respecting the traditional ring gauges. If you notice on our brands, we use a lot of Cuban Vitolas, a lot of 46, 48s, 50s, 52s. We don't make 660s. We may put out an LE at a 56 or 58. We don't traditionally do the big ring gauges. So it's about keeping that tradition of that and using traditional tobaccos. But then even the names of our cigars, the Jericho Hill, the Las Calaveras, using a skull, hitting on that Mexican culture, Coroneta, not all of our brands, whereas a lot of our brands are unique in that sense. You know what I mean? It's not about Don whatever. It's not, trying to use Cuba because none of us are Cuban, right? So we try to approach it from our angle and be very authentic to who we are. We're a Nashville-based company, so there's a lot of music influence in our cigars. So we have a cigar called Jericho Hill. That's a fictitious town in a song called Cocaine Blues by Johnny Cash. So, it's that, I think, is who we are as a company. We are very much about keeping some tradition and then adding in our spin on the packaging, the naming, and the uniqueness of those cigars.
Well, I like how you mentioned like that you're a Nashville based company, but I noticed like you guys do like pay homage to certain states, especially with your I want to say your like flower series. Like there's the Yellow Rose, which is based out of Texas, and then I cannot remember the Hawaii version.
Paniolo.
Yes. What was your directive on that when Crown Heads decided to make those?
When we started, we're, like I said, Nashville, Tennessee. We're very proud. That's where CAO is based. When it sold, it went to Richmond, Virginia, and Crown Heads and Oz Family Cigars were both founded in Nashville as well. And so we wanted to make a cigar. The first state cigar we did was called Tennessee Waltz, and that's the name of a song. And we really did it as an homage to the retailers in our home state that supported us from day one. And then our second biggest supporter after Tennessee was Texas. So we did the Yellow Rose of Texas as a thank you to our retailers in Texas. And then we eventually did one for Ohio, and we eventually do one for Paniolo for Hawaii. Paniolo means Hawaiian cowboy. Basically, the Mexican cowboys went over to Hawaii and taught the Hawaiians how to herd cattle and everything, and so they named them Paniolos. So it's really it's a horseshoe. It's kind of the logo of that brand. It's just paying homage to people that have supported us over many, many years. Hawaii has a very high tax.
Yes.
And so for us to do something for our people in Hawaii was something. John Huber loves Hawaii. That's his favorite place to go. So he wanted to do something for Hawaii. So each one has a unique story behind it.
I was going to almost ask why Hawaii was on a kind of like the concentration of that, but it makes sense now. So Hawaii market, how is that? I never even think about that in terms of selling, especially to tobacco.
It's interesting. It's a very anti-smoking state. They've talked about doing generational bans in that state. It's hard to hold an event there, but the retailers that are there are very good. They're very strong. The cigar smokers in Hawaii, you're not going to find a better bunch. I mean, they are so supportive, so incredible, all the laws, all the regulations, and they still stay true to the industry and support the industry. As I said, John, that's his favorite place to be is Hawaii. And so it was kind of our ode to, hey, this state, even through all the hardships, through all the challenges, they still support big time. So we wanted to do something special. And that's really where it came about. It was about honoring their difficulty. It's almost like Canada. Canada, after they went to plain
Canada.
They went to their plain packaging, their big taxes, and we stayed. A lot of brands pulled out of Canada, and we stayed in Canada, and we have a very strong following in Canada. We just did a Canadian exclusive this year called the Moose Kick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's a way to thank all of our retailers up there. Like, hey, you've got plain packaging. You have the highest taxes around. You can't smoke in a cigar shop. We're going to do something for you because you keep fighting a good fight. and you keep supporting the industry. So sometimes that's what drives us to do something for those particular markets.
So the Moose Kick, what is the Moose Kick? What's the blend? I'm curious.
100% Nicaraguan filler binder. The wrapper's Mexican San Andreas. We do a cigar every couple of years at Crown Heads called the Mule Kick, and it's basically our 4-kick cigar. We amp it up with a little extra Ligero, and through that we call it a moose kick because it's a lot stronger, or a mule kick because it's a lot stronger.
100%.
Yes,
oh my gosh.
Yes, no doubt. And so, as a little spin on that, we did this year a cigar for Canada just called the Moose Kick, as a little tongue-in-cheek ode to our mule kick in the U.S. And we just launched that in Canada, and is doing very well up there.
I like that about your brand, though. Like, you do pay homage, especially, like, I feel like, especially with places that have a lot of grit and struggle, I feel like there's more character development on that. Do you feel like that's, like, the kind of, like, roundabout, I guess, description of Crown Heads? Like, not only are you guys, like, kind of innovating and, like, testing the industry as a whole, but you do appreciate those who are struggling. And, like, I guess I actually don't know what point I'm trying to make, but, like, I feel like it does, like, create a certain level of complementary to creating the legacy and continuing it.
Yeah, I think it's the feeling of Nashville. Nashville being this southern town, 25 years ago, it was just a southern city. It, didn't have much going on except for country music. And now you look at Nashville, it's Everyone's a huge. It's the number one bachelor and bachelorette city. It beat out Las Vegas. They've got now a NFL team. They've got the hockey team. They've got a professional soccer team. They're trying to get baseball there. Nashville kind of was that blue collar southern city that has now risen to this very well known, respected American city. And I think that's in the bones of Crown Heads. And I think that is part of our cigars and part of our marketing and part of who we are. It's just being very authentic, I think,
Yeah, authenticity is very important. So I don't even know where you touched base on how you really got into cigars initially.
Oh, so how do you initially, yeah. So I would say so I saw uncles smoking Te Amo Mexican cigars. My background is Mexican, and I just had this infatuation with cigar smoking. I thought it was beautiful. I loved the idea of it, and it's a handmade product. In '92, my mother actually bought me the very first cigar aficionado, and by '96, I was dabbling in cigars, and I just picked up every book, everything I could learn. I would say by 98, 99, I was full-fledged. The history going back to the 20s and 30s and 40s, reading everything I could possibly read on premium cigars. And then obviously it's part of the culture. Tobacco comes from the Americas. It doesn't come from Africa. It doesn't come from Europe or Asia. It comes from the Americas. It's part of our heritage. The Aztecs, the Mayans, the Taínos, the Inca were all smoking tobacco before the Europeans. Europeans didn't see tobacco until 1492, and the culture was already there. And it was the mending of these two, the Europeans coming over, introducing them, being introduced to tobacco by the indigenous people, that created today what we know as the cigar industry. And it's in our DNA, I think. And I love agriculture, and it was just a way to kind of marry culture, the agriculture love, the culture of who we are, the proud of the Americas. And being in an industry that I just fell in love with, and I went to all the big smokes and all this, and then eventually found my way into the business. So, and I'm very proud to still be around.
It's so interesting because I've been smoking cigars for I think 13 years now, and especially when I was living in California, I would go to events, and if I brought a domesticated brands, they were very snobby about that. But I like how you said it was this is really an America's thing. So even though it was grown in Cuba, but it's still it's kind of part of the central region of the globe. So we can always consider it part of our region. So I don't even know why we even sector that to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, tobacco, we know that tobacco, the original tobacco plants came from the Peru, Ecuador area. We know by records, by fossil records. We know by all the things that, people that work with plants, they were able to track it back to South America. It went through Mexico and Central America and Guatemala, and then all through the Caribbean. And the Europeans first saw it in the Caribbean when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. And so the tobacco is deep in the roots of Native Americans, the Navajo, the Cherokee, the native groups that are in Mexico, the native groups in South America, the Tainos and Arawak of the Caribbean. It was all part of the Americas. And so it's very much rooted in the American story. When you think about the colonial times of the United States, rum was being drank and tobacco was being grown, and tobacco was worth its weight in gold, and it helped build what we know today as the United States of America. All the founding fathers grew tobacco. Virginia was a great tobacco state, and that's because tobacco had been grown there for so long already before they got there. So it is a part of our DNA, I think, as Americans, either it be South Americans, North Americans, Caribbean Americans, or the United States. It is definitely in the DNA.
Like, we're just gonna say America and we're gonna move on. But you've been in the industry for so long, and you worked with several families that have been kind of like adjacent to what you're working with now. But what continues you to be a part of this industry? Because I feel like now in 2024, it's very easy to move from one, like even professionally, from one sector to the next. What keeps you going here in this industry?
I think it's the new cigar smokers. I think that there's always, when you go to an event and you meet people, say, hey, listen, I just got introduced to cigars, and I met some of now my best friends in the cigar shop or at an event. And it's an industry that I think is very welcoming. I think it's an industry that you can be of any background and be a part of it. You're very much welcomed in this business as a retailer, as a consumer. And that's what I love, how diverse our industry truly is. There's a $5 cigar. There are $300 cigars. There are people that buy cigars by individuals. There's people that buy them strictly by the boxes. And all over the world, they smoke cigars. I sell into Hong Kong. I sell into Japan. I sell into Belgium. I sell into Germany and the United States and Canada and the Caribbean. And it's cigar smokers, I think, is what keeps me attached to the industry. And at the end of the day, I mean, if you love what you do, and I love introducing people to cigars, and I love cigars. I love the agricultural part. It's part of the soil. You put the seed in the ground, it grows. You do something with it. It's not technology advanced, right? You have your cell phone, you have your computers, or what we're on right now, the internet. Cigars are very much old school. If I took you to a factory in 1901, if we could go back on a time machine and we walked into a factory in 1901 in Cuba, the factories look the same. They sound very much the same. The only difference is today they're listening to salsa and merengue and bachata music on their iPads or on the music stereo, where back then they had lectors, people reading the newspaper and books and magazines. That's how we have cigars called Romeo y Julieta and Monte Cristo, because those were books that were being read to the rollers, the Count of Monte Cristo, and they were reading, and that's how those names came about. And that's really the biggest difference. And so I love the fact that it's very, very old school, and the industry has not changed much when it comes to manufacturing of our product. I love the steadfast of it.
No, I do find that interesting, like how our product is so, I guess, rudimentary in terms of like how we produce it, how we basically put it to market every time, but yet it's considered a luxury product. And, this is what's interesting about working for McAuliffe, is because I've been having these conversations, especially with customers, in terms of what is a luxury brand, which I think is interesting. Have you had those conversations as well?
Yeah, people will ask, what's a luxury brand? Is it driven by price? Is it driven by culture? Is it driven by marketing? And, I always say that cigars are looked at as a luxury product.
Yes.
But the God's honest truth is the product is made by farmers, made in the third world. I think in the United States, if you go to Canada, or you go to, let's say, England, it is a white collar. It is a luxury white collar kind of culture, but in the United States is very much a blue collar, I think, culture. And I think it's mislabeled when people call it a luxury item. But yeah, to me, it's not a luxury item. That's what it is referred to. But I think it's just it's a farm boy kind of product when you think about it.
Alan, you're back.
Alan is back, baby.
Alan's back.
Like,
Alan, I was a little nervous. I thought maybe you'd caught on fire or something.
Oh, come on. You think I can't carry the conversation. Come on.
this is
We
the
got it.
second time, like in the last few months, this has happened. And
She's killing me. All she wants to talk about is sports, and I'm like, I want to talk cigars.
wait, what did I miss? Like, where are we right now?
We're essentially talking about right now in terms of like how it's funny, like the starting point of manufacturing cigars is very traditional based. Like it's not very, I guess I want to say forward technology in terms of how we produce, but it's still represented as a luxury product. So it's like we're kind of talking about exactly who is the consumer demographic of cigars.
I mean, the consumer demographic of cigars. I mean, that's what I like about the industry now is that it's not like just old men. It's like it was different variant. I mean, like I used to be the youngest guy sitting at a cigar lounge. Now I go to the cigar lounge. There's like 10 people younger than me. Maybe it's because I've aged a lot.
Well, you're just getting
But
older, Alan.
I know, yeah, that is. I mean, I am gonna be 43 on Friday, but like, yeah, I mean, I think the demographics have changed. I think the consumers have changed. I think one thing you can say is there's a certain you can kind of guess sometimes, like what someone's gonna be interested in based off how they're dressed or their age, because younger people seem to be anti-establishment, so they don't want the general, the Altonist. They don't want the old man cigar. They want something that's younger and newer. But the thing is, even those young people, they started out smoking usually with those big brands to begin with.
Yeah.
I think,
A lot has changed in the industry. As you said, Alan, the consumer has changed. Lounges have changed. The marketing has
they didn't,
changed. The
they didn't
laws have
have lounges.
changed. But cigars have not changed.
Yeah,
Cigars have pretty much made the same way they've been made for the last 200 years, 300 years.
Well, honestly, like for how I started as a cigar smoker, I remember like the first brand I was smoking was Monte Cristo Platinum Series. And I walked in my first cigar lounge, and the guy working behind the desk, working in the humidor, was like, "You can do better." And he's like, "You can get a better price cigar, better quality." And he's taught me from then on, and I've carried it on beyond that. So I guess like the argument for me now, like I do challenge, especially working at McAuliffe, we are kind of challenging the industry in terms of prices for individual cigars. Is what is a luxury product? A good quality product in terms of cigars.
Yeah, and price does not drive.
Yeah,
price does not drive quality in our industry. It really doesn't. I mean,
sure.
I can pick up a $30 cigar that can be plugged and be under fermented tobacco. I can pick up a $5 cigar that draws. I can pick up a $5 cigar that draws great, that smokes great, that's been properly fermented. I think in this world of $100 cigars right now, look, there's always a market for everything, right? And they're doing it because there's a market there. But the God's honest truth is that we have not priced people out of the industry. You can still go into a cigar shop, and I think your series, your red, blue, black, that series, I think is a great example of great price, incredible quality, and yet it's still a luxury product. You know what I mean?
A cigar is always going to be a luxury. I feel like
well,
$5, $10, $30, $100, $150, $200 to $500. It's always going to be luxury
I
to
actually
anyone.
So I kind of disagree in this
Oh,
sense.
do you, Alan?
Well, what I'm saying is, in other countries, it really is a luxury good where it could cost you $30, $40, $50. If it's a Cuban, it could cost you hundreds of dollars. Like it's just in Australia, a $10 cigar is $30. It really is a luxury in other countries. In our country, it's so much more affordable to have a cigar. But that's why, if you look at the entire consumption worldwide, the U.S. has like 400 million people, and there's 7 billion people in this world. So it's like 6% of the total global population, but it's 50% of the cigar consumption worldwide. One, because of culture. Two, because it's not. I think it's an everyday product for a lot of people in this country.
Yeah, and Alan, actually, when you were off, we had mentioned that if you go to Canada, if you go to England, if you go to Hong Kong, it is a white collar industry. But in the United States, it's a blue collar industry. That is the biggest surprise that I get. Like, I do a lot of events in Michigan and places like that, and they have the car industry, and you'll have people from Europe come over and they'll walk into a cigar shop, and they're shocked at the prices. They're shocked that the guy that works on the line at Ford is in a cigar lounge smoking. Guys are in their jeans, guys are in their jeans or t-shirt in a cigar shop, where back home you have to have a suit jacket on. That's what I love. But proximity wise, tobacco is from this part of the world. So it is already part of our culture and helped build the United States of America at the founding fathers. And I just think that it's in our DNA. And I'm happy to say that, we have a cigar line called Juarez. All the sizes are retail under $10, and you can get an incredible cigar for a great price. And you don't have to have it. But if you want a $100 cigar, you can have $100 cigar.
But I do find, like, this is what's interesting about being on the manufacturer side of this industry is, like, especially when we're in America, like you said, we are very much a blue collar demographic. I don't feel like a lot of aspirational retailers, they're not in the game yet, or they are. They don't envision their customer to be of that demographic. They want them to be of a higher echelon. And for me personally, I'm working class. I feel like I'm blue collared. So because I've been smoking for a long time. So I definitely am in there. Do you feel like that's not being necessarily inclusive to that demographic? Sometimes some of the retailers.
I think it depends on where you're at in the country. Oh no, we lost Alan again.
Oh no.
I think it's where you're at in the United. Look, when you're in Manhattan, there's a lot of expensive cigars being sold. Mm-hmm. But if you're in areas of Detroit where there's a lot of manufacturing, the cigar shops are much more understanding of their clientele are these blue collar hard workers, and every dollar they spend means a lot. And it's so I think it depends on where you are in the country. You know what I mean? It's and taxes too. I mean, mm-hmm. The higher tax state, you see usually a little bit higher clientele. But it depends on where you're at. But I can tell you from doing events in rural Pennsylvania, you know what I mean, that farmers come in and buy boxes of cigars, and I love seeing that, knowing that as an industry, how people look at us as I always think the politicians that are anti-smoking, they look at us and think we're all fat cat lawyers smoking cigars, wrapping our cigars in $100 bills and lighting them. And that's not the real case of a cigar smoker today.
Well, and true. And like, especially when we're talking about the longevity of cigar smokers, and if like, cause like I talk to people like you who's been in the industry for like 20 plus years, and it's kind of almost a daunting topic of conversation to see, like, for me, if I'm going to be in the industry for another 20 years, to see how that's going to look. And I was talking about this with a customer the other day, like guys that are getting into cigar smoking right now can't afford 20 plus cigars initially. So like, yep. I'm not saying they don't, like, eventually when they earn more income, they will eventually, of course, but mm-hmm. like we should always be introducing that introductory price point, so like they can continue that legacy and therefore replace the demographic of smokers and then continue that line for generations to come. Like, I think that's so important.
I agree. That's why, a lot of cigar shops have their bundle wall. They have their, hey, these are great sub $10. These are going to be your 20 plus. And there's a place for the high end Fuentes, but Fuente also makes the curly heads. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's a place for everybody in this industry, at least in the United States there is. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about our industry. Mm-hmm. And I think today, look, celebrities really drove the cigar industry to popularity in the 90s, but they all dropped out. It was a trend for them. True cigar smokers stood around. When all of the FDA and all this and made it more difficult, you saw a lot of the fancier person, going, it's too much of a headache. But at the end of the day, true cigar smokers who love the culture will always support the industry and be there, no matter what the trends come and go. There'll be a point where, the $100 cigar will not be in vogue anymore, and we'll go back to just normal price cigars,
I have a question of like about how there's so many young people and they want to get into cigar culture, and that brings up like a question I had, kind of related to that with this. I always get asked by a lot of people, young and even middle-aged people, who want to get into the cigar industry. They want to either work as a sales rep or work in marketing, like or start their own brand. Like, what advice would you give to someone as being as a veteran as yourself in the industry? Like, do they want to do those things? How should they proceed to get down that path?
I think it's like any other industry. Are you in it because you want it and you love it, or are you trying to make a dollar? There's other careers you can make money much quicker than the cigar industry. But if you love the industry, the first thing I would tell a person to do is soak up as much knowledge as you can. If your knowledge only goes back 10 or 20 years, there's so much more history to this, where it started, how it started, the people that names have been lost to history, the people that kept the industry alive after the revolution, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and how we got to where we are today. Study that, learn that. There's a lot of great information. There's great books on the history of tobacco. Learn about it. And then the best and easiest way to get in the cigar industry is become a cigar rep. That is the entry level job. That is how you get in the business. And from there, you can move up. You know, I've seen young people who just want to start a brand. And I go, listen, man, the best thing you could probably do is work for another brand, cut your teeth, work the road, understand what it takes to build a brand and make a sale, and then do your own thing. It is very tough to just start with a brand out of nowhere.
Oh yeah,
It is very, very tough to do that. And I think that when you pay your dues, the industry respects that, understands that, and will give you love. But the best way to get in is become a rep, become a sales rep, be a broker, be on the weekends, and then do it full time, and then get in with a company like a McAuliffe or a Crown Heads or even an Altadis or General, and learn the aspect of what really drives the industry. And then from there, you can progress into maybe designing brand labels, learning tobacco, going down to the factories and learning all of that. I think, it's like anything else. I would say, I know this is a weird analogy, but if you want to be a rapper today, I think the best thing you do is go back and listen to the rappers of the early 80s and the 90s and learn where the culture came from. And then you can respect the culture and understand where you're going. I think cigars are the same way.
so I think the hard part sometimes is getting that first rep job. And I can tell you that with myself.
Of
I was in
course.
the industry for a very long time before I became a rep. I started even further down the trough, so to speak. But like, there's a lot of people who also start off before that as tobacconists. Like
Mhm.
Miguel and I both know a gentleman very well who started off as a tobacconist at a cigar store in Charlotte, North Carolina, and is now the CEO of one of the largest companies in the industry. Um, like, a lot of people start off as tobacconists, and like, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's not an easy job to have to pay the
I
bills.
started off of that, so
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
100%.
Like
Yeah.
the CEO of JR Cigars, he started off as a tobacconist. Like,
He
there's
worked. He worked at Tinderbox in
yeah,
Charlotte, North Carolina. He got an opportunity to work with Altadis. He became the head of the
he worked at
sales
Rocky.
there,
Like,
and yeah, and then became now the president of JR Cigar. I think all of that is possible. You don't need any advanced degrees in our business. What you need is hard work. You need respect the culture and to soak up as much info as you possibly can.
I think
This
having
industry,
yeah,
at the heart of this industry, it's farmers, it's laborers. That is the heart of our industry, and understanding how where the culture came from, I think, can help you build a strong future.
I think one of the things going forward to advance your career beyond being a sales rep is really understanding the data. Now, not all companies are data related and data heavy and data driven, but having that tool in your toolbox is extremely important, because being able to go into a meeting with a famous cigars or Cigars International or Phillips and King, or and having and understanding the numbers and understanding movement and growth and margins, like, that's when you get to the top level, like Miguel is at. That's when that stuff really becomes important. And if you don't have that skill set by the time you're done being a rep, or by the time, like, you're probably, like, let's say by year 4 or 5 as a rep, you should have that strength, because the people at the top of this industry have that. Like Michael Condor, I'm
Yeah,
sure he knows the numbers better than anyone. And
better than anyone.
it's like
Absolutely.
it like I I'm a numbers person, so I love numbers. It's not always the easiest for people to grasp, but I mean, like learn as much as you can about data and stuff. You don't have to be able to do predictive models and stuff and advanced analytics, but like in this industry, if you have just the basics, you're further along than most people.
Yeah, I think, our industry is getting better with data. We are a very old school industry. I mean, I remember it was not long ago where majority of cigar shops did not have a computer. It was still
Yeah.
rang up on a regular, there was no understanding of their inventory. They went to the show and just ordered what they thought they wanted or needed, where today it's much more, let me show you my sales. Let me show you, I remember when Skip Martin, when he was a retailer, and Skip would come to our booth at CAO to place an order. I mean, Skip was so data driven at that point. He was so different than any retailer that would come to us. He would say, I can tell you when your CAO Brasilia sells best. I can tell you the day and I can tell you the time when that cigar is selling the best. And now I think a lot of retailers have caught up to that. Manufacturers as well have caught up to that. Our industry, I mean, barcodes was something that our industry pushed off for the longest time. When you look how old barcodes actually are and how recently barcodes have been added. I remember back in the day when people started using barcodes, I remember people said, hell, a Frizo before Padron and Fuente use them. Well, Fuente's using barcodes. Padron hasn't gone to barcodes yet, but
Jones is the one outlier.
yeah, they're an outlier.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was different. I remember when cigar companies first started getting websites. You know what I mean? And I remember, Lauren, this is I remember being in a meeting at CAO, and they hired a person to come in and teach us about this thing called Twitter.
Oh shit! Oh my god!
And Twitter had just launched, and they were explaining to us what Twitter was, and we said, well, okay, what's a tweet? And we put, how can people find a tweet? Like,
no.
We didn't, there was no concept of that. And
well, to
look
be
where we are
fair,
today.
Social media is still against us in certain ways. So I don't know how necessarily it's progressive in our industry. Because I work with social media a lot, and the censoring issues are definitely like I make a joke every time, same joke. So if people have heard it, I apologize. But if we were trafficking children, it'd be a lot easier than being in the tobacco industry. 100%.
Hey,
100%.
Mr. Zuckerberg, she's joking.
No, I'm not joking. I'm really not.
It's interesting because I will tell you this. Back in, let's say, 98, 99, if I wanted to meet Tim Osgener of CAO Cigars, if I wanted to talk to Rocky Patel, I had to go to an event that they were at. Today, you can follow Rocky. Rocky handles his own Instagram account. John Huber handles his own Instagram. You can shoot Pete Johnson a direct message. If you shoot a message on our Instagram, The Crowned Heads, John Huber gets that message directly. He handles it himself. Mm-hmm. That was not a thing back then. So the information and the technology for our industry is definitely there, but it's like anything else. We fight the good fight.
Siphon. Yeah.
We do. I mean, look, I remember, being in cigar shops, visiting retailers when high school graduation was going on, and you had floods of 18-year-old kids coming in to buy their first cigar. Now you have to be 21.
Yeah. I do find that ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah, I do too.
Because I remember, okay, this is even before I got into cigars. I was going to hookah lounges. That was our jam to hang out with. But I mean, I could get in another rant about infantilizing the younger generation, especially in the American culture right now, but I'm not going to get into that. But I do find that ridiculous because, especially with, I guess, underage tobacco consumerism, it has definitely decreased, especially since the 90s. And since we widened the gap of the demographic, it's not even, I don't even know why we're still even on the platform to argue against underage use at all.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100%.
Ridiculous.
It's just because you're talking to like members of the government who just they're not even aware of cigars. Like
it's vape. It's just vape now.
Well, what I'm saying is I think a lot of members of Congress and the state legislators, they're also so like a lot of them have never smoked a cigar, know nothing about cigars, so they have a perception that it's the same thing as something else.
Well, it's just a self-righteous argument, right? Like everyone's going to latch onto it, so we're just protecting the children. But no children are smoking cigars right now.
I mean, my family, no one else smokes cigars in my family except for me. My aunt and uncle, like Oh, so they're made machines? Like what type of like chemicals do you guys put in it? I'm like guys, this like, and these are people that are 70, 80 years old, but they like because they're not into this culture, they really are completely ignorant of it. And like I have to like defend it against the people who just are not involved. It's just because it's a very niche, very small group of people.
You know how many
Only
Yeah, it
friends that
is.
ask me if I'm addicted to it
yeah, like
But
only a percent of people.
all the time.
and look, in the 20s, as much as 7 out of 10 men in the United States smoke cigars. Now we're talking maybe 1 out of every 10.
It's a
So
very small demographic.
it's a very small demographic. Less than 2% of all cigars sold in the United States are hand rolled. Think
Yeah.
about that. 98% are Dutch Master, Philly Blunts, Black and Milds. Only 2% are handmade, and we're the number one consumer of handmade cigars in the world. So that kind of puts it in perspective, right? And
Yeah.
and when you look at it is, I mean, look, I don't know anything about cars, right? I couldn't tell you anything about cars, but I'm sure if I spent time with someone who really loved cars, they could give me the whole insight on what makes cars unique and the technology, right? And cigars are no different. So when you have politicians making rules and laws about things they have no understanding of, it's tough for us to expect them to understand. I think that's why the PCA, the CRA, and all these organizations are so important,
Yes.
because they are doing the hard work. Mike Conder and Alan Rubin and Rocky Patel and Robert Levine and all these guys that spend so much time in DC. It's about educating the politicians and saying, hey, listen, you don't know what we are. Let us tell you a little bit about the history of premium cigars and why it is what it is and why it's not a cigarette, why it's not vape, why it's not hookah, and why we're not advertising to kids.
See what
Kids,
happened.
yeah.
Well, the worst thing that ever happened for the cigar industry in terms of how it relates to politics and how it gets the government aside is they banned the smoke-filled rooms. Where all
Mhm.
the decisions used to be made, all the decisions in Congress and government and who was going to be presidential nominee were done in smoke-filled rooms by party hacks back in the day. They got rid of smoke-filled rooms because like you can't smoke anywhere anymore. So now there is no one in that room that understands cigars and can relate
There's
to it.
more, yeah, there's more drinking than smoking going on, and
Yeah,
I always, they always talk about flavored tobaccos, and I go, look, there's always been aromatic or flavored pipe tobaccos. That's always been around. And look at walk down a vodka aisle. Walk down an aisle in a grocery store and you see all the vodkas. There's birthday cake flavored. There's whipped cream flavored.
bubble
You
gum,
know,
watermelon. There's
yeah. There's a
cotton
reason.
candy.
Exactly.
I mean, like it's just it's really hard and it's a fighting uphill battle. I mean, the best thing we can do is continue to try to educate and inform, but also like if you know people who work in government, try to have a conversation with them. I mean,
100%.
I have a friend from high school who's in Congress. Believe it or not, they actually do listen to people. Like
Yeah.
if you like, they have an obligation to listen and meet with their constituents. So if you want a meeting, have them ask for a meeting. It might take 6 months to get a meeting, but like, hey, you can make that conversation, and every person matters. But so we touched on the culture and stuff, but so, so you were originally were with CAO and also Durano, and then after that happened, where did you go next before Crown
Well,
Heads?
so it was really interesting. So CAO was a brand that was growing, so I learned how to build a brand. Tarano was a brand that was pretty much dying, and we brought it back to life.
Yes,
So I
I remember
learned
that.
I learned how to go in shops and ask for a second and third chance to build Tarano, and then to the point where it was bought by General Cigar. And then I did a little stint with my buddy Roberto Duran, who worked for Habanos SA for many years. He wound up joining Dunhill Cigars, and he was the head of Dunhill Premium Cigars, and we distributed Dunhill, and Tarano made Dunhill cigars. So um, that was and I learned at Duran. I worked with Jack Tarano there. I learned the international cigar business. We sold into Hong Kong and Canada and different places around the world. So by the time my friends at Crown Head said, hey, we're big enough now where we need a national sales manager, they invited me to join them. I had already had 3 great experiences to bring to Crown Heads. They knew me from CAO. I'd always stayed in touch with them. And Mike Conder, who most people in the industry may not know, Mike's been in the industry since 1980, believe it or not.
Wow.
At one time he was vice president of sales for General Cigar. Um,
Wow.
he was the kind of guy who I always leaned on for industry advice, career advice, and so when the opportunity came up to join him and John and Tim Osgener at Crown Heads, and I knew Tim was going to come back to the industry and launch Oz Family Cigars, I jumped on the opportunity and I leaned on my lessons that I learned at CAO, Tarano, and Duran, and I brought that to Crown Heads, and here I am today.
So just to give an update to our listeners, Lauren's browser crashed, kind of like mine did before. So just to give you guys a heads up that like she's going to try to get back in. If she can't, she's very sorry, but unfortunately, I guess there's something wrong with StreamYard tonight. But so yeah, besides that, like I know that you're besides cigars, like you have a lot of other passions and hobbies, and one of them is baseball. And I want to do a little bit of baseball talk. Now that Lauren's out here, we could go all night on baseball, but I won't keep you that long about baseball. But like, like you're a Reds fan in Cincinnati, like like how do you feel like your team is going right now? Like, do you like how often do you go to baseball games? I know that you don't. You live in the west coast of Florida now, so
Yeah, I'm a baseball fanatic. So when I'm in a city, I'll go to any game. So if I'm in a minor league city, I go and catch minor league games. I was in Milwaukee towards the end of last baseball season. So Bradley, Ruben, myself, one of the reps for Espinosa, my rep Danny for Crown Heads, we all went and caught a Milwaukee Brewers game. I
wow.
just love baseball in general. I go to as many games as I can. And then when international games, whenever like this past the February, the City del Caribe, which is the Caribbean World Series, was in Miami this year, and so I go to that. I flew to, I go down to Miami and catch those games, and I just I love the game of baseball. I love the history of baseball, the Latin American leagues, the Mexican leagues, the Cuban league, and I am a diehard Cincinnati Reds fan. We're a small market team, but I'm a Reds fan through and through. I don't think that's an excuse to lose. I just want the last time they won a World Series was 1990. I hope to see one more before I die. So, but my mother grew up a Cubs fan. I saw you put up a quote up there from someone who said "Go Cubbies." My mom is a diehard Chicago Cubs fan and raised us to be Cubs fans. But I grew up in Cincinnati, and you couldn't help become a Reds fan. And it's a baseball city. 1869 was the founding of professional baseball in Cincinnati. So it's a
Wow.
long history. I just love baseball. You can tell the history of America through baseball. When you think about the Civil War, and some places during the Civil War, they would stop fighting on a Sunday, and the North and South would get together on these
Play a game of
bloodied
baseball. Yeah.
battlefields and play a game of baseball. And I love the game. Segregation, 1947. Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier, and at that time, the country was going through this trying to break the rules and the ugliness of segregation. You can tell the history of our country after September 11th, when the Yankees came back and played in New York, and
As a
there was
Yankees
this.
fan, to me,
Yeah, I mean, you remember that. You remember that. You remember
it,
that. I mean, that
I
was
mean,
an incredible moment in American
yeah.
history.
It almost
You
made me
know.
feel healed, and for a minute, it made me forget about the tragedy that happened in my family's hometown. Like, I mean, like to me, the most devastating that ever happened as a Yankees fan was us losing the World Series that year because it felt like
Destiny almost.
destiny, and it felt like that
Yeah.
would like it's silly to get too much from sports, but in that moment, I felt like we kind of needed it.
Yeah.
Um, like it's just I love baseball. I mean, not as much as I used to when I was growing up in it, but it's also because I grew up going to Marlins games. Even though I'm a Yankees fan, I grew up in South Florida, and
Yeah.
when they moved further south to Little Havana, it just became where it became too much difficult to get to a game, and the team was really bad. I mean, but I've probably been to like 150 Marlin games.
Yeah.
I've been to like 20 or 30 Yankee spring training games because they used to have spring training in Fort Lauderdale, right
Yeah.
20 minutes from my house. Like Mickey
Yep.
Mantle used to play in that field, and like we used to go to like old timer baseball games where Dave Kingman was playing, and Sparky Lyle and Whitey Ford was actually pitching. Like I remember like seeing guys like Wayne Garrett. And I'm like, who are these people? My dad's like, oh, these guys retired like 10 years ago. And
Oh
like,
man, that's awesome, man.
like
I have my wife and I have a little hat business that we do just for fun. It's called Herencia 21, HERENCIA, Herencia, which means heritage in Spanish. The number 21. We have a website. We sell hats, and they're baseball hats, and they all have Latin American countries on them. And I have a blog on there that I write about baseball. It's just a hobby that I have. We sell hats on there, and we have pins for hats and things like that, all because of my love of Latin American baseball. And the influence that Latin baseball has now on our game. And I think it's an amazing sport. I think it's unique, different than football, different than hockey, different than all that. And I think
it's
if you
peaceful.
love
Really.
history, yeah, if you love history, if you love, it's just you and a bat and a ball. And there's something I love about it. And there's just a love for it. And
Yeah.
there's
I
great
love
photos of Babe
football.
Ruth with a cigar in his mouth.
I love football, but I don't like going to football games.
Hmm.
Baseball, I love going to because you don't have to be paying attention to every last second. And it's like the little things that you notice on a baseball field when you're watching it live in person. But like, oh, by the way, one of our watchers, Larry Frank, asked, "How's your card collection? Do you have a baseball card collection?"
I do have a baseball card collection. Today's modern cards, I buy a pack once in a while just for fun. I don't buy to sell or anything. I just love the nostalgia of opening up a baseball card set. But my pride and joy, I have the entire T206 Cincinnati Reds team. I have it mounted on my wall.
From 1908.
The T206 came out from 1909 to 1911.
Yeah. Okay.
They were cigarettes. They were little cards. I
Like the
have
old
every.
Pirates with like $5 million.
Yes, 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 yes. And luckily, I'm not a Pirates fan, so I don't have to worry about collecting that card. But I have the full Cincinnati Reds team with some really
Wow.
rare backs, some polar bear backs, some Sovereign, um, Old Mill backs to them. Those were cigarette brands that they came in. Piedmont is
So
very common, but I have the full Reds team, and I have it mounted in my office.
I used to be a big baseball card and sports card aficionado. It's been about 20 years since I bought any because my brother used to call it like cardboard cocaine. And he my mom used to always say, "How much money have I spent for you on baseball cards?" Um,
Yeah,
it's weird because she worked in a sports collectibles company. Growing up, my mom's boss owned a company called Club Level and Sports Pads. They made notepads with team logos, but then they did like when not well did they signings with Cal Ripken and Eddie Murray and Paul Molitor when they hit like these milestones. So I was always around this stuff and getting like to go to a lot of these signings, and I still have my autograph collection is pretty good, but my baseball card collection I used, it's where I actually learned how to negotiate. Is I would buy cards, then go to card shows, trade them and sell them and negotiate. Or if I was going to visit my mom's office, I'd bring my baseball cards with me and try to sell them to her boss. And like he would literally nickel and dime me for every little thing. He didn't want the cards because his card collection's worth millions of dollars. He
yeah, yeah.
has he has 252 tops Mickey Manos.
That's
But
incredible.
the entire purpose of negotiating was to teach me how to negotiate. He didn't want the cards. He just wanted me to. I'm like, it says $2 in the price book. He goes, it's worth what someone's willing to pay. I'm willing to pay $1.25. That's what it's
Yeah,
worth. And I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
$1.50. He's like, done. I'm like, so now it's worth $1.50. And like, that's what I used to love that about cards more than even
There's
collecting it. It was like trying to trade it and buy it, and so I can level up and get to the next better card.
There's a great book you should check out. I'll send you the author's name, but the book is called Mint Condition. It is my favorite baseball book. It's all about baseball cards and where they came from. They touch upon tobacco early on in
Tobacco,
the book,
then gum later.
and
Like
yep,
yeah,
and it's a great book. It's called Mint Condition, and it's an incredible book that I always
so
recommend the people to read.
so my brother once gave me $5. This is in 1990, probably 96. He gave me $5 if I need a piece of gum from a pack of 1977 Topps baseball cards. I
Yeah,
ate the pack. I got sick, but it was worth the $5. Um,
that's awesome.
like, um, so like last week in baseball, something really big happened. Juan Soto signed a record deal. I want to say it was 15 years, $51 million a year. What are your thoughts on that contract? Do you think the Mets made the right decision? Do you think the Yankees were smart not to match that or succeed that?
I think a player is worth, just like the baseball cards, a player is worth whatever someone's willing to pay. So when people get upset about the contracts, I always say you can't be upset against the player. If someone's going to hand you a $765 million contract, you're going to take it. And if that's what someone's willing to pay you, then it's not on the player. It's you're worth what someone's willing to pay. Look, baseball is capitalism. The United States is capitalism. That's what we're based on, right? And so there's no floor, there's no ceiling in baseball. You can spend whatever you want. Yeah, there's a luxury tax, but you can spend whatever you want. And it is what it is. I mean, there are. If you love the history of baseball, guys like, you take a guy like Yogi Berra. He had to have an off-season job for most of his career because he didn't make enough. So there were a lot of players that came before who didn't make good money. And so it is whatever someone's willing to pay. In baseball, the contract's fully guaranteed. I don't like the deferred money thing, but I'm all for it.
The Dodgers have like $300 billion in assets. They can literally take $10 billion, park it in an interest-bearing account that pays the entire contract, and they never lose a cent because they have 10 times as much money as the Mets owner, who's worth
And I think a lot of people and use football as part of it. At one time, football teams were all ran by families. Now, the majority of football teams are owned by groups, by corporations or groups that tie their money together. So sports have changed. Baseball's changed. It's no longer, families
have a team like the Lakers ever again. I mean, the reason why the Lakers don't spend as much money as other teams is because they got their money from basketball. So that's like their main source of revenue. They don't have anything else like that gives them the money to sign players. So
100%.
Like they're like the Steinbrenner's made their money from shipping, but also from baseball. They can't compete in today's baseball with that because even they have limits. I mean,
look at the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, they're owned by the Brown family, and football's that's their business, opposed to someone like the Mets' new owner, who baseball wasn't his business, right? So the world has changed. Money has changed. I think if CEOs can get bonuses of $10 or $20 million, and it just shows that our economy is healthy, that the United States is healthy, and the sport is very, very healthy. And
what's funny is billionaires are supposed to be better businessmen and smarter than us. But
I always say, and I tell no doubt, and I tell everyone, look, man, it is what it is. You're worth what someone's willing to pay you, and if someone wants to pay me $1 million a year to sell cigars, you better believe I'm taking that contract.
I as a Yankees fan, I had no problem. I have no problem with anyone getting paid what they get paid. As a Yankees fan, I didn't want them to match that type of contract. One, because I felt it would debilitate us from signing other players and getting better. And to me, it's like for $75 million signing bonus and $45 million the first year, that's $120 million. We can sign 4 All-Stars for that same price.
Absolutely.
As a Yankees fan, I have no problem taking a deal. I just felt like I feel like a guy like him who's not a good defensive player, who's going to be a DH probably in 4 years, and then it gives you less flexibility in your lineup and your other players who Aaron Judge might be a DH someday. So then what do you do with it? And so, like, as a Yankees fan, my only regret was that we had to trade a lot of stuff to get him for 1 year.
Yeah.
So when they traded for him, I was like, that's great. But if it's a 1 year rental, you just gave up a lot for nothing.
That happens. I mean, that happens a lot. I remember when the Cubs, they gave up a lot to get Aroldis Chapman, and they won the World Series that year. Sometimes you gamble and it pays off. Sometimes you gamble and it doesn't. But for the Yankees, it's about winning the World Series, where a lot of other teams just getting to the World Series is a big deal.
What's weird as a Yankees fan this year, our mutual friend William Cooper, felt like I shouldn't be happy with just making the World Series. I'm like, dude, it's been a long time since I remember watching meaningful games in October with my team. I'll take what I can get this year. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it was the first time where I watched every single game and the suspense was there, and because it reminded me of what that felt like. I mean, granted, losing reminded me of 2004, but I'm okay with that because
Yeah.
we haven't been relevant in a very long time, really.
Yeah. No
So
doubt.
so uh, so now that we did the 5 minutes of baseball, outside of baseball and outside of cigars, what are some of the hobbies and passions you do have?
For me, it's really my family. I've been married. My wife and I just celebrated our 22nd anniversary
Congratulations.
on, thank you, on December 8th. And we have two kids, a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old. So
Wow.
I love spending time with my family. I love traveling. My wife and I and the kids, we love just going to different parts of the country. I think this year we're going to go, or this 2025, we're going to go check out Atlanta, where this year we checked out Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it just, those little things, seeing different parts of the country. The United States is a big country, and we love going to the Caribbean and spending time, at different islands. My wife's from the Caribbean, but just seeing different places. I mean, to me, that is part of the love of being a human, is going around seeing different cultures, different cities, even if it's within the same country. It's really, really cool.
I go to Atlanta all the time since it's part of my territory. I love the city except for the traffic. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
like it's a great city. Let's see what else. Like, are there any like travel destinations for work or fun outside of work that, like you said, Atlanta and Albuquerque, like
I
anywhere?
love, I love going to California. I think California is the most beautiful state in the lower 48, and regardless of the politics, if you like them or you don't like them, I don't really care about that. I just the state is so beautiful. It's a beautiful state in our country, and from San Diego to L.A. to San Francisco to Sacramento, like I love California. I love the beauty of that state, the water, the ocean, the seafood. So
I
California is always a highlight for me.
I was born in San Diego, and whenever I hear people badmouth California, it's mostly out of politics. I'm like, have you ever been there? They're like, no. I'm like, then you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't care about the politics of it. Go there and tell me it's not incredibly beautiful. Go to La Jolla and tell me that's not beautiful. Go to Seal
yeah.
Beach, see the sea lions. Go to Point Loma and go to the Juan Arcabrillo Monument and be amazed. I mean, the funny thing is, I was born in San Diego. We moved away when I was 2, and in my mid 20s, I lived there for a couple of years, and it's where I met my first future coworker in the cigar industry, a guy named Ryan Bendel, who works at Altus. When I met him, he was working at Excalibur Cigars, and I was just a customer
Oh,
there.
yeah, yeah.
7 years later, we're coworkers, and today he actually give me a call and check on me. But like, San Diego's a great place. I mean, I haven't
Yep.
gotten north of LA. I like LA. I just hate the traffic, and
Of course,
I
of
mean,
course. The thing, the thing,
Malibu,
the thing
20
about cool areas, the thing about cool areas like Atlanta or LA or Houston, Miami. Look, everyone knows it's cool. So the traffic is always horrible, but the sights, the sounds, the restaurants are all worth it. For a good visit.
absolutely. One of our former employees here at our company, Andy Yaffe, used to be our national sales manager. I know there's a lot of people listening and watching. Probably Rick is probably watching who want to know how Andy is doing. How's Andy doing now with you guys?
Andy is doing wonderful. I think he'll be moving up an organization here very soon. Andy is doing a great job. He's our Mid Atlantic rep, handling places like Tennessee and North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. He's based right out of Nashville, Tennessee, where our head office is. Andy's been a great addition to the team. I remember when he called me and inquired about the opportunity, and obviously we have always respected Andy and how his reputation is out there. So it was a joy to welcome him into the company, and he's doing a great job.
Absolutely, Andy. We do miss him a lot. He was my first boss in this company. He taught me a lot. He took me down Broadway Boulevard or Broadway Street, whatever it is, for my
Yep,
first time.
Broadway. Yep.
I was quickly bored, but I did enjoy. What's the place that we went to in Nashville? Hattie B's. I did enjoy that.
Oh,
Uh,
Hattie B's, absolutely. Hot chicken.
I mean, walking down Broadway is fun, but like all the bars, not my scene.
You got to
But
see it at least once.
yeah, it was cool to see it. I mean, and I was like that. It was a lot shorter than I thought it'd be. I thought it'd be like a long drag of like hundreds of bars. And no, it's kind of like Memphis, where Beale Street is
Beale
actually
Street is
not,
short.
it's very short, and that's how
Yep.
Broadway felt. I mean,
I mean, look, Bourbon Street is a long street, but the happening area is actually pretty short.
yeah, it's like 6 blocks, like, and that's about
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yep.
so, like, what are some things that you guys have coming out this, like, in the near future that you're able to talk about?
Well, we're going to have two new lines that we're going to launch at PCA. I'm not ready to share the names yet, but we've got two new blends that'll make their debut. One for Oz Family Cigars, one for Crown Heads. I think we're going to announce that hopefully soon. We do have some LEs coming back. I think we're going to bring Mule Kick back. We didn't do
Oh,
one
wow.
last year, but Mule Kick will be back this year. You'll see some really cool LEs coming from us. But in the market right now, we were able to put out the Decimo, which is a 10th anniversary Las Calaveras that's out there in the market right now. And I just think we're excited about our core products that we have debuting at the PCA trade show in April this year. So a lot of cool, exciting things coming from Crown Heads and Oz Family Cigars. We're doing a lot of events out there. We have an event roadshow page on the Crown Heads website and the Oz Family website if you want to check out any of our events. But we got a lot of great, exciting products coming out. But I would say keep an eye out for Mule Kick and keep a lookout in April for these two new lines coming out. But out in the humidors right now, check out Las Calaveras with the pink band and check out the Las Calaveras Decimo, which was an anniversary cigar. Those are in the market right now, and we're excited about the future, man.
The first Las Calaveras, when it came out in 2014, I picked it up at Smoke Inn in Boynton Beach, and I never heard of Crown Heads at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was too strong for me, which is saying a lot. And I was like, I can't handle this. And then the next week, someone advised me to try the Helly Grange, which is
Yeah.
probably my favorite Crown Head cigar. It's the most well-rounded, and like sometimes it's like people only. A lot of times our consumers now are just obsessed with what's new. I
Mm-hmm.
highly encourage people to go back, smoke the JD Howard,
Four
smoke the
Kicks.
Four Kicks.
Yeah, Four Kicks Capa Especial. There's so many great classic blends in our lineup that we're very proud of.
Oh yeah, I mean it's weird because during COVID I started going back to the stuff that I originally smoked when I first started smoking cigars. It didn't hold up to how I remembered it, but and someone was from my former company, and I was like, "Did this blend change or something? Because it's not as good as I remember." And a coworker that we both know was like, "Alan, the blend doesn't change that much. What changes your palate?
Yeah.
Because back then this was considered a strong cigar. In today's market, it's not because what's happened is the blend stay the same, but everything else has changed, the marketplace and your palate, and it was always challenging. But so with the end of the year coming up, do you have any events that you wanted to like hype up or promote?
Yeah, you know what? We call behind the blend events with Tim Osgener, where he does basically a blending seminar, and he's done a bunch of those. We just finished up two of them recently at Corona in Orlando. We did two back to back, and he's got two in I think the Dallas market this week with Brian McGee. People can see all the events that we have left. He's got a couple in Louisiana coming up as well. Oz Family Cigars, OZ Family Cigars. You can see all the events on there that Tim is going to be at. If you haven't been one of those events, it is absolutely awesome. You get to smoke little burritos and learn about the blending of the Bosphorus and the Aramas cigars. Those are events that are coming up, so I highly recommend if you're in those markets, check out Oz Family Cigars. And then tomorrow I leave for Houston. I have two events, one in Katy and one in Conroe at the Cigars International stores. Thursday and Friday, I'll be there from 6 to 10. And so that's my week.
See, if I was going to be in Houston this week, I'd be happy to go there. But fortunately, I'm out of town. For myself, actually, this Saturday we have a big McAllis social up in Madison, Alabama, at the
Oh,
cigar.
nice.
It's our last social, and I wanted to make it very special. So I got Dreamland Barbecue is gonna be catering the entire thing. We have like 25 racks of ribs, like 40 half chickens. You
Wow.
guys can there, come out. The food is free. The cigars are not, but it's gonna be a great time. Amanda McAllis will be there.
That is
Um,
awesome.
yeah, like we each had these events and we each got a budget for food. I'm like, if I'm doing Alabama, I'm doing Dreamland. I'm like, I'm sorry, but like, I want to make some connection to the state. And surprisingly, when they gave me the invoice for what it's going to cost, I was like, oh, this is within our budget.
Yeah, that's
But
awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome.
definitely. Well, Miguel, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I'm sorry about all the issues we had tonight with our technology. Hopefully, we have you on in the new year sometime. And we look forward to seeing you at the trade show. All the ambassadors listening or any fans listening, be sure to check out Crown Heads. They're wonderful people. They have a long history in the cigar industry. We encourage all of our customers to embrace the culture and embrace other companies as well. Thank you, Miguel, for taking the time.
Thank you guys so much, and to the ambassadors, be safe out there. Have some great, happy holidays. Be safe, and we'll see you in the new year.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, Miguel.
Thanks, buddy. Bye.